Let's move on to Mahmoud's reforms. Would you mind, having read...
Yes.
You've done... I also read the 35 pages, but I have to admit, I had to read it quickly.
Yes, well, before.
Because it's only come out a couple hours ago. Would you mind... Well, let's go through together the major reforms that she's proposing.
Okay, so the first one, the big flagship that was being trailed over the weekend was, of course, that refugees would have to wait 20 years to get settlement. They'd have to wait a period that was 4 times longer than they currently do. This was, presented in the Times and Telegraph and such forth as being an incredibly harshening of the measures. I actually think, having read the document, what they've really done is posit that as a worst case scenario for an individual. They've created sort of off ramps for individuals to get out of that 20-year route if they're eligible to go into study routes, if they're eligible to go into work routes, and if they can find an appropriate sponsor to help them to get off that leeway. So
at the moment it's 10 years.
At the moment, it's 5 years actually from grant of refugee status to obtaining settled status. So it would take really, it's 5 years effectively.
Okay. So they're increasing it to 20.
Increasing it to 20.
But there are more off ramps.
There's more off-ramps, and a key point about this actually, and this really sets them apart from what the Tories were trying to do, is that individuals who arrive in the country illegally, i.e. via small boat predominantly, will still be able to go on this pathway. Now, the Tory plans were that individuals who have come into the country on a small boat would never be eligible for settled status, and therefore they would also be disbarred from citizenship, because citizenship is one step along from settled status. So actually what these plans have done in a way is kind of ordain and give a sort of hint of approval to that method, and saying it's still somehow a valid route to obtain that settled status in Britain, which really gives you sort of a lot of security. It allows your children to be British citizens by birth. It allows you, of course, to bring individuals over. But even in that 20-year period, they still hold that refugee status, which as soon as they get it, does give them a whole raft of benefits already. I think it gives them access to universal credit. They can start accessing social housing. They can start having a conversation about family reunions as well. There was an interesting study that came out actually today, which showed that 66% of people that hold refugee status right now are claiming universal credit, which I think gives you some semblance of the costs involved with this. Other studies have recently shown by the Home Office certain refugee routes, about 12% of individuals on those routes are in employment, and a lot of economic inactivity is taking place on these routes. So I think this idea of actually it being somehow a huge boon to the British taxpayer to prolong this process doesn't bear out by the fact that we know these individuals, as soon as they get their refugee status, already have a lot of rights in the UK anyway.
Yeah, but this is illegally, right? These are those who enter illegally that we're talking about, or is this?
Yes. So for 20 years, it's 20 years for those who've entered illegally. It'll be 10 years for those who are coming on sort of government-sponsored refugee routes, like more recognised, sort of as we saw with the Afghanistan,
so you said 10 years,
and Hong Kong. Yeah, 10 years. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So it's worth thinking about this. So the majority of people who come illegally, is it via the Channel on small boats, or is it those who come here legally and then stay illegally?
So we don't actually have proper exit data. We haven't had it since about 2020 to know how many individuals coming on visas are overstaying. There were some suggestions that, certain nationalities have a high propensity, if they're on a tourist visa route or on a study visa route, just to simply disappear rather than returning at the end of their visa. But the fact is, and as you pointed out at the start of the show, we already have a huge legal migrant population. Most of that is driven by those who have overstayed visas. The small boats crisis, and it is still a crisis, is really actually quite small fry when you consider the sheer numbers of people that have been able to stay in the country for long periods of time because they haven't left at the end of the visa. The Pew Research estimates 700,000 to 900,000 illegal migrant population. That was in 2017. Total, but that was in 2017. And of course, since then, exit controls have really fallen by the wayside in terms of quality. We've handed out record numbers of visas, so more people are likely by default to have overstayed those visas as well. And then, of course, we have seen actually a compounding of individuals doing that irregular entry as well. And the irregular entry is really the sort of tip of the iceberg. It's the most visible type of illegal migration. It's, before the small boats, it was the lorries and it was individuals sneaking in via other covert means. But a large percentage of those that are staying illegally or in the country illegally have done so after getting actually the initial permission to come into the country.
When you say irregular,
Well,
I thought that was a sort of woke term for saying illegal.
Yeah, I've been reading too many Home Office data sets, unfortunately. It is illegal. It is illegal.
So
it's done without permission. It's done without the permission of the authority into the state to which you're entering. But it's at the same time, irregular does...
Is it different from illegal in any way?
No, they're
okay.
Yeah, they're synonymous.
Okay. So if they are coming illegally, and a lot of them, as you described, not all of them are coming from France, then isn't there an argument to say, well, they're coming from a safe country? Why should they ever be, if they come here, if they break the law to come here in the first place, why should they ever be given refuge? I mean, there isn't a war, as far as I know, going on in France. Why should we have any incentive for them to come here?
And this is it. This is what the principle of that last Conservative government was when they were trying to grip the problem, the recognition that actually these are individuals who've come here with no sort of right. They haven't put in an application. They haven't been approved by the Home Office, the authorities. They're falling foul of actually some sections of immigration law, which I couldn't recite off the top of my head. But in reality, actually, what Mahmoud's plans have done is really say that this is becoming a sort of quasi-recognised route for individuals to put in an application for asylum. And this was something that the Conservatives never went anywhere near. So, I don't want to use the term loosely, but I do consider this as sort of a preemptive amnesty for many individuals that might be looking to break into our country going forward. And again, if we're talking about reducing pull factors, if you're actually saying to an individual, you're coming over a small boat, we would still consider maybe actually, if you put in an asylum claim, allowing you to stay for 20 years as a refugee and then maybe give you settled status on top of that. It really doesn't work in terms of getting actually that deterrent in place.
Let's go for the most contentious piece, which is the so-called jewellery clause, which is that assets such as jewellery, cars and e-bikes will be required to contribute towards the taxpayer-funded bed, board and financial support for those asylum seekers. So this is what Corbyn called disgusting, and I think someone from Novara Media, the far-left media group, posted a photograph of all the shoes stacked up at Auschwitz as sort of an example of this. This actually has been trialled in Denmark. This is something the centre-left party over there, led by Mette Frederiksen, is one of their many reforms, and I'm of the understanding that Mahmoud actually visited Denmark and a lot of their policies have been copied from this. So what can you tell me about this proposal?
Well, you've got those Labour MPs calling it all kinds of sort of undesirable terms. I think actually, really, this is a red herring. This is the Home Secretary has gone over with the team from the Home Office on a fact-finding mission to Denmark to look at their asylum system, and they've seen this sort of component nestled amongst a lot of other measures and thought, this feels like a bit of red meat that we can dangle in the media in the sort of build up to our announcement. This seems tough. This seems like we're sort of not messing around and actually we are going to fight for the British taxpayer to get a fair deal. But in reality, when you actually look at the sort of scale to which these measures have been used in Denmark, I think it's a couple of dozen times at best. And when you compare that with the sheer numbers that are coming across on the channel, you kind of recognise that actually this is little more than a kind of a gimmick, effectively. It's something to sound tough. It's something to say to the British public, we recognise your concerns about the fact that, the asylum system budget has ballooned. It's gone up from, I think, about 500 million in 2019 to, just short of 5 billion 2 years ago, a situation that is really out of control. And we're going to start making sure that actually you're not being left out of pocket because of this. It really won't amount to anything. It has been done to sort of grab a few headlines. And frankly, I actually think it's probably one of the most irrelevant parts, despite it being the most contentious, one of the most irrelevant parts of the proposal being put forward, because it won't really deter any individual because, as I said, a couple of dozen people losing a few gold rings or something like that, it doesn't strike me as a particularly all-encompassing measure.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Winston Marshall Show. You can click here to watch the full episode, and for more clips like this one, don't forget to subscribe. And as always, be well.